I think the thing that I'm a huge believer in the power of capitalism. And I think one of the things that I don't agree with is when people say, we will introduce AI here, these jobs will go away here, and this company will become a lot more profitable. The reason I don't believe that is AI is widely available. So that company's competitors have access to the exact same technology that enabled them to apply that. So what will happen is they will absorb maybe some of the efficiencies of that technology, so their competitor, at the very least, one of them will lower prices, and which will force the other one to lower prices. But the other thing that can happen is one of them will say, wow, rather than just lowering prices, maybe I'll invest that in some other part of their business, and they'll grow in other ways. This happened with banking. So when I was a kid, the automated teller machine was introduced. If you fast forwarded 20 years, so think the full adoption curve of ATMs, we didn't have fewer bank branches, and we did not have fewer people in those bank branches either. But the people in the banks were not tellers anymore. They did other jobs because some sophisticated banker decided we can actually grow our revenue more if we actually put high-value consultative banking services in these branches. And it's a trite example, but that is the power of new technology and capitalism and competition.
These days, part of the team, we have Llama CPP, which is like the most used runtime for local AI these days. Makes it super easy to, once you have downloaded a model, to basically run it on any of your hardware. And I hope it will continue to grow. Like ultimately, for me, we're like in the early stage of AI, right? And in this early stage of AI, for some reason, 99% of the workloads are APIs calls to massive proprietary models. Probably because it's easier, because people feel more comfortable maybe to start with that. But ultimately, I think a very big part of your workloads are going to be either new open source models, are going to be smaller, more specialized models, are going to be local models. And maybe you're going to use kind of like a big proprietary costly API just for 5% of your tokens, right? And then 95% of your token is either going to be like more specialized open source models or local models, which would be nice.
I had a conversation with Nathan Lambert recently.
The best ones do in limited ways and with a limited blast radius. They might roll it out internally, for example. They might roll it out to a set of like alpha customers. They might roll it out to 1% of users or something like that.
Right.
There's definitely way more caution there than there is with Gen AI native startups. But building agents is so iterative. And the importance of this iteration can really not be understated. And so I think the enterprises that are I think a failure mode for enterprises is you have some idea of an agent. You take 3 months to craft a bunch of examples. You take another 3 months to build the agent. You take another 3 months to get humans to look at everything. Right. By the space has just moved so fast. Like the whole idea you came up with, there's probably there's just a better way to do it at that
Human
point.
History. And like, obviously, like, you're going to have companies that are just one employee and they're going to do everything. And then you come out the other end and you're like, wow, like actually like maintaining that thing takes a lot of work. I'm having to, catch so many mistakes that it's making. And so I'm spending as much time sort of like, after the project, just reviewing everything and changing and modifying, or the model, gets upgraded and it kind of, breaks everything that I just did. And now I have to go in and kind of redesign it again. So once you're through the AI psychosis period, you kind of land on the other side. And I guess I'm benefited by both being a power user of these tools, but then seeing the real world and kind of like being like, oh, wow, like actually in your particular environment, I think there's zero chance that you could have done what I can do on the weekend for fun, because I would never allow that to happen from a security standpoint, or, name your reason. So here's kind of the litany of things that are the work ahead.
What a number of banks have said is, you know what, instead of doing this efficiency gain, which is worthwhile, let's rethink the entire workflow and market a get approved in 10-minute loan product. Because rather than waiting around for a week for a human to be free for an hour, we can send the loan application to AI right away for a decision. But the challenge with implementing this in a lot of businesses is this takes someone with a broader scope to rethink and redesign the entire workflow, because now you have to market a get approved in 10 minutes product. You have to route the application to approval not in a day, but right away. So marketing, data infra needs to be involved. Then yes, AI can make the initial decision, and then final diligence execution probably needs to scale up as well. And so I find that bottom innovation is really valuable. It generates lots of ideas, but often it takes, and that has to be complemented with a top-down motion of having someone with a broader scope to change how all of these steps operate to then create growth. And I find that many businesses talk about cost savings. That's fine, worth doing. But I try to push for more imaginative things we could do with AI, which is drive growth, because we can only save so much money, but growth has almost no practical ceiling.
And so I think education is going to be kind of like reshuffled by this quite substantially, where it's the end of like teaching each other things almost a little bit. Like if I have a library, for example, of code or something like that, it used to be that you have documentation for other people who are going to use your library, but like you shouldn't do that anymore. Like you should have, instead of HTML documents for humans, you have markdown documents for agents. Because if agents get it, then they can just explain all the different parts of it. So it's this redirection through agents, and that's like, so I think,
unlearn for most founders, and I had to do it too, which is to be successful in AI product layer, whether you're a model builder or not, it's not about building something that gets 1 billion users. That mentality has to completely shift. There are a few power users who are propelling this token economy right now. If you look at like all these crazy stories of how there's this one engineer who got Amazon to spend like $500 million a month because of some stupid way they set up like agent loop inside Claude Code. Okay, maybe that's a mistake, but there are real engineers in Meta, in other companies spending like 10 million a year per engineer on these, coding tools. There are users in Perplexity Computer. There's one user I think who spends upwards of like $10,000 a month, something like that. Crazy.
How should learning happen? How should we inspire children? What's their sort of ability to go have a new pedagogical system even that they can enter? Because I think even like if you take the traditional ways, right, the anxiety that, let's say, I had growing up on learning. Interestingly enough, that's a sort of an artifact of the scarcity of opportunity, scarcity of good learning, and a variety of things which may or may not be true going forward. So one of the first things I think is creating a learning environment where students and children in particular, from the earliest of ages, don't develop these phobias for math or science or what have you. In fact, because everyone's by definition a lot more curious. It's just that contact with the world is what, erodes that curiosity and confidence that children have innately. How do we develop that even further? By giving them the ability to explore, knowing that there's no anxiety, because after all, the expertise is always going to be there in abundance. It's really your cognitive coverage of that expertise that's more at a premium.